India is not just a country, it is an idea. A living civilization that has absorbed thousands of years of change, invasion, culture, and faith. From the snow-capped Himalayas to the southern seas, India's story has always been about coexistence of languages, philosophies, and beliefs. But in the last few decades, a quiet transformation has begun. A new voice, confident and assertive, creators, has risen across the nation, the voice of Hindu nationalism. For some, it represents a long overdue rediscovery of cultural pride. For others, it raises questions about the very foundation of India's secular identity. The question before us is not political, it is civilizational. Creators, can India's modern democracy sustain both faith and freedom equally? To answer that, we must go back in time to the very roots of this movement. 2. Creators, historical roots of Hindu nationalism or Hindutva did not begin in recent politics. Haters, its intellectual roots lie in the late 19th century, when colonial India was witnessing both humiliation and awakening. During British rule, Indian society faced deep cultural anxiety. Creators, Western education and missionary expansion made many Indians question, who are we as a people? Thinkers like Swami Vivekananda, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, creators and later Vinayak Damodar Savarkar began redefining Indian identity through the lens of Hindu civilization. Savarkar, in his 1923 book Hindutva, Who is a Hindu? Creators argued that India was not merely a land of faiths, but a holy motherland defined by shared heritage, culture, and geography. This marked the birth of modern Hindu nationalism. At the same time, organizations like the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh (RSS) emerged with the goal of strengthening Hindu society, not necessarily through religion, but through discipline and unity. Haters. These early movements were not just political. They were emotional, rooted in centuries of cultural pride, but also pain. For generations, India had been ruled by foreign powers, first Islamic empires, created the British. In that context, Hindu nationalism was seen as a call for self-respect, a spiritual and cultural resistance. But as India moved toward independence, this ideology met another powerful idea, secular democracy. To independence and the birth of secular India, when India gained independence in 1947, it was born not only from freedom but from partition, a division that scarred the subcontinent along religious lines. The founding leaders, led by Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, creators, believed India must rise above religious identity. They envisioned a secular state where every faith would enjoy equal respect under one constitution. In theory, secularism in India didn't mean rejection of religion. It meant equal distance from all religions. But in practice, the legacy of partition left deep mistrust. Creators, the newly formed Pakistan called itself an Islamic Republic. India, in contrast, chose pluralism, yet the wounds were fresh, the memories raw. While Nehru's India promoted scientific temper and secular nationalism, a section of society felt their civilizational identity was being overshadowed by westernized politics. This was the ideological fault line that would resurface decades later, between cultural pride and constitutional equality. 4. Post-1990s politics, globalization, and identity. The 1990s changed India forever. Economically, the nation opened up to globalization. Culturally, it entered an age of television, private media, and rapid urbanization. Politically, a new form of nationalism began to take shape. The Ram Janmabhoomi movement, centered on Ayodhya, became a turning point. For millions, it was not just about a temple. It was about reclaiming history. Creators, for others, it signaled the rise of religious politics. When the Babri Masjid was demolished in 1992, India's secular fabric shook. Riots and political polarization followed. But one thing became clear. Creators, Hindu identity had entered the national mainstream. The 21st century saw this energy transform into political power. The rise of leaders like Narendra Modi gave Hindu nationalism a new, modern face, not just rooted in religion, but also in development and digital empowerment. Modi's narrative of Hindu pride and national progress resonated with millions, especially the youth who wanted both identity and ambition. This fusion of cultural nationalism and economic aspiration made Hindu nationalism not just a movement, but a mindset. 5. Technology, media, and modern nationalism. In the digital age, ideas travel faster than ever. Social media, once a tool for connection, has become a stage for ideological battles. The rise of Hindu nationalism cannot be understood without understanding the power of digital communication. Platforms like WhatsApp, Twitter, now X, and YouTube turned every individual into an influencer of belief. What was once a movement of the few became a voice of the masses. This has two sides. On one hand, technology gave millions of Hindus across the world a sense of shared belonging, a digital temple of identity. On the other hand, misinformation, echo chambers, and polarized narratives deepen divisions between communities. Algorithms don't understand harmony, they amplify emotion. And in India, emotion is history. Creators, the line between cultural pride and religious dominance became thinner, and so secularism, once taken for granted, began to feel fragile. 6. Creators' impact on secularism and society. So what does this rise mean for secularism today? First, it challenges the interpretation of secularism itself. For decades, creators, secularism was seen as neutrality, the state's equal respect for all faiths. But today, some argue that secularism was often selective, more political than principled. Hindu nationalists claim they are restoring balance, giving Hindu culture the same dignity others have enjoyed. Critics argue this shift risks marginalizing minorities and diluting constitutional equality. Second, there's a cultural impact. Public spaces, from school textbooks to TV debates, now reflect more overt symbols of Hindu tradition. Festivals, slogans, and rituals once confined to temples now echo in political campaigns and government functions. For some, this is pride restored. For others, it's the politicization of faith. Third, there's a psychological dimension. India's young generation is growing up amid two powerful narratives, global modernity and ancient identity. They are proud to be Hindu, yet curious to be global citizens. Balancing these identities will define the next chapter of Indian democracy. Finally, the impact on minorities cannot be ignored. Creators. While India's constitution protects all faiths, reports of social discrimination and online hate have increased. If fear and mistrust, subtle yet persistent, now shape inter-community relations in ways unseen before. Yet, despite tensions, India continues to be home to one of the most religiously diverse populations and still voting, debating, and coexisting. That resilience itself is remarkable. 7. Creators. Reflection. The search for balance. So where does India go from here? The rise of Hindu nationalism is not a temporary wave. It's a long-term evolution of identity. It represents both empowerment and anxiety, pride and polarization, unity and uncertainty. The challenge for India is not to suppress this movement, but to guide it. A democracy as vast as India cannot thrive on uniformity. Its strength has always been synthesis, the ability to hold multiple truths together. A secular India doesn't mean a godless India. It means an India where faith is personal and freedom is universal. In the coming decades, India will continue to wrestle with this balance between its ancient soul and modern state. And perhaps, creators, that struggle itself is what keeps it alive. As Sundar Pichai once said in a different context, India's story has always been about embracing change while staying true to who we are. The same applies here. The rise of Hindu nationalism is part of India's ongoing search for meaning, for pride and for harmony. And in that search lies both the risk and the hope that one day India will not have to choose between being Hindu and being secular. It will simply be India.